Good evening all, welcome on behalf of the Theosophical Society Point Loma. Tonight we start a new series on a special topic, the mystical birth. And tonight we are going to talk about the 4 sacred moments of the year. We will do that as usual in 3 parts of about 20-25 minutes each. The first part is about initiation, a quickening process of evolution. Then solstices and equinoxes. And in the third part, we are going to talk about the inner God. And after each part, there is a 3-minute break in which you can ask your question using our email or the chat function. Well, the mystical birth must be seen in a great cycle that has 4 benchmarks. Just as the compass rose has 4 directions, north, east, south, and west, we can divide the year into 4 sacred moments. And those moments take place at the time of the change of seasons. 21st of December, the winter solstice, 21st of March, the spring equinox, and then 21st of June, summer solstice, and the 21st of September, the autumnal equinox. These are cosmic moments in which mystical processes, the process of initiation, can take place. Why do these initiations take place precisely at those moments of the year? That is because the spiritual currents which go from the heart of the sun throughout the solar system are most favorable for those initiations at those moments. We are going to explain that in this talk. So, at these 4 sacred moments of the year, initiations take place. And those initiations differ in degree. Compared to classes at a school, first you take the first class and you learn everything there is in that class, and when you have passed your tests and exams, you go to the second class. You cannot do the second class before the first. The order of degree also relates to initiations, which are referred to by the following names in esoteric philosophy. December, the initiation of the mystic birth. 21st of March, the initiation of the great temptation. Then the initiation of the great renunciation. And finally, the initiation of the great passing. Before we explain what we mean by initiations, and especially the mystic birth, let us first consider what mysticism is. After all, we are talking about a mystic birth. This is somewhat different, of course, than the ordinary birth. The word mystic, of mysticism, comes from a Greek word myo, which means to close or to hide. And that closing refers to the closing of one's mouth, so about keeping secret what you have been taught. Related or derived from muo is mysticus and mystes. Mysticus means mysterious, and mystes is mystery. The background of this is that behind our sense perceptible world is another world. In other words, this physical world is nothing but the outside, the shell, the crust of inner worlds. In fact, there's not just one world hidden behind what we can perceive with our senses. There is a hierarchy of worlds. Worlds that, considered from the perspective of our sensory world, in ethereality, that is, in degree to which they are ethereal, are ever increasing. So our physical world can be called the least ethereal. And then a little bit more inwardly, you have to imagine these worlds as if one is inside the other. There is a world a little less gross, which we call the astral world. But that is a very vague term because all those worlds are astral. Astral means star-like, radiant. Those worlds are astral in the sense that they appear to be radiant to us. But above, or rather more inner than this astral world, there are much more ethereal worlds, loftier too. And these worlds were called by different names in almost all the religious systems of antiquity. In India, they were called lokas and talas. The Greeks spoke of earth, water, fire, air, ether, the divine, and the one. And other cultures had different names. We will not dwell on these worlds now. The point is just that there are inner worlds. And those inner worlds are as much real, or actually are much more real, much more enduring, and therefore much more fallible, then they should therefore receive much more attention than this outer world. These worlds form a hierarchy of being, a hierarchy of spheres of existence. They are not separated from each other. On the contrary, they emerge from each other just as ice emerges from water. The highest world is the top of that hierarchy, the common source, the ultimate reality, the root of the tree from which all these worlds come. Mystics speak of the source as the one, or the one life, or the divine. Plato calls it the idea of good. In India, they speak of Brahman. And the mystics assumes that the one life, which is beyond the senses, which is beyond the intellect, can only be known through the spiritual element in man. And that spiritual element, the mystical Christians call the Christus, the inner Christus, or the Christus principle. You can call it the inner Buddha. It is the striving of the mystic to become one with that one life. Each of these worlds can be known. And you know why? Because we humans are a copy in miniature of this cosmic hierarchy, this hierarchy of worlds. Our physical body, for example, corresponds to Earth, the crudest of these 7 worlds. And the deepest core in us is a God, a divine being. It is called Atman in Sanskrit. And the Upanishads, the holy books of India, teach us Atman is Brahman. Our inner God is identical with Brahman, and Brahman is the one life, the divinity of the cosmos. Well, initiation and the sacred seasons of the year have everything to do with mysticism. They have everything to do with those worlds unknown to most of us, although paradoxically, we also dwell in them. How then and when then? Well, where do you think you are when you sleep, when you dream, or when you have a dreamless, deep, peaceful sleep? Then I am in my bed, you may say. No, your body is in your bed, but you are somewhere else, only you don't know it. You lose your self-consciousness in those worlds. And why? Because you don't yet have sufficient affinity with those worlds. Perhaps in the astral realm you have some affinity, yet the dreams you have there are often distorted images, and the critical self-consciousness is inactive or only partially active. Now, of course, you can say, if I don't know those words, if I only dwell in them during sleep, what do I know about them? Well, you may not be able to know those words self-consciously, but you can have a strong presumption that they exist. Look, I have never been to the North Pole, yet I have a very strong suspicion, a very strong presumption that it exists. I come to that conclusion because my geographic knowledge, my knowledge of the solar system, combined with people who have been there or flown over it, it all gives me the presumption, bordering on certainty, that the North Pole exists. Similarly, on the basis of intellect and intuition and relying on people who do know these inner realms, I can know something about those inner worlds as well. The mystic is someone who has this strong presumption, an intuitive awareness of these other worlds, also of the deeper layers within himself, and takes that into account, adjusts his goals accordingly. So a mystic is not a vague person, but somebody who focuses his consciousness on very different things. He lives from other layers within himself. The difference between an ordinary person and a mystic is the difference in vision. Is the ordinary person focused on this outer world, assigning all reality to it? The mystic knows or has a strong presumption that behind this outer world, there are other worlds that are much more real. The mystic is focused, more focused on those inner worlds. He may live in our outer world, but he's, so to speak, not of this world. He's focused on those inner worlds. Initiation now involves self-consciously exploring those inner worlds, getting to know them, yes, even becoming one with them. You enter the mystical path, and that mystical path is yourself. Because as many invisible worlds as there are, as many elements, as many principles of consciousness a human being has, or rather is. In other words, a human being is not composed only of the matter of this world, the world we can perceive with our senses, but he is equally composed of all those elements, of all that material which belongs to all those other worlds. And those worlds you are going to know about in initiation, using the bodies that belong to those worlds. Those bodies emanate from within you. They are already within you. Bodies, therefore, that are made up of the material that belong to those worlds. There is a famous statement that can be found in Helena Blavatsky's mystical little book, The Voice of the Silent. It says, "You cannot travel on the path before you have become the path itself." And this captures this thought in a nutshell. The path is yourself. The path are the abilities that are within each of us. But in most people, they are not yet developed, or only develop for a little bit. Only when we have developed them, you can enter into the path and thus gain first-hand knowledge of those inner areas. And to enter into that path is what we call initiation. Initiation into the mysteries of life. And then, of course, the question is, how do I develop those abilities and powers within myself? How do I make that inner path in myself accessible? That too is a matter of initiation. Or perhaps I should better say the preparatory stages of the real initiations, which begin with the initiation of the mystic birth. These initiations took place everywhere in ancient times. Scattered throughout all parts of the earth in former times were mystery schools. Those are schools where dedicated human beings who had a right, selfless mentality were admitted to learn more of the secrets of the cosmos and those of man as a child of the cosmos. The knock on the gate of that mystery school was a right, compassionate attitude. The desire that by increasing your knowledge, by expanding your consciousness, you could mean more for your fellow human beings. Those mystery schools had some classes, grades, degrees, exactly as is in a normal school. And you could only go after the second class, a higher degree, if you had learned the lessons of the first grade. And unlike our schools, the exams were not so much a test with a few questions, but you had to show in the practice of everyday life that you had learned your lessons. The fulfillment of what is learned in the first degree of this mystery school can be understood as the first initiations, the preparatory initiations for those of the great birth. So the first, the second, and the third degree of initiations consisted of study. Study of the processes in life, study of the processes in humans, in the cosmos, including the study of the processes of death. And then practice. You have to draw ethical conclusions from those studies and apply them. And that requires self-discipline. And from the fourth to the 7 degrees of initiations, they consisted of gaining first-hand experience in the spiritual realms of the cosmos. You become what you have studied. And that requires an increasing degree of discipline. These are stages that every human being goes through on the great, great pilgrimage in which one evolves from an unself-conscious God spark to a self-conscious God. Only in this great evolutionary journey, the masses and the majority of people will do it at a pace that is many, many, many times slower than if you accomplish this process through initiations. So initiation is accelerated evolution. We bring out at a faster rate the spiritual and divine abilities within us. We are making them active. It is not that we skip phases of our evolution or that we don't have to work off old karma. In this acceleration process, karma is coming at us at a faster pace. So accelerated evolution puts pressure on us. We get into a kind of pressure cooker. Perhaps if we do not try to evolve self-consciously, we settle certain karmic issue in maybe 7 or maybe 10 or maybe even more lives. If we go the path of initiation, we do it in 1 life. And this, of course, requires tremendous effort, great concentration, and above all, tremendous discipline. Initiation also means making a beginning. You begin a new life. This is actually true from the very first initiation. Your life takes a different course. What you thought was important becomes less important. And what you didn't really have your attention now gets full attention. Old thought habits and patterns die, and new ideas, new habits are being born. This is true in some respect for all these degrees of initiations, although the intensity, the depth, becomes greater and greater as you get into the higher degrees. In fact, the first, and to some extent the second degree of initiation, is to study Theosophia. And don't draw wrong conclusions from that. Study doesn't mean you must read all the Theosophical books, study the secret doctrine, and certainly it is useful, it is very useful to do that. It may even be necessary to do that, but the main thing is to apply what you study in the practice of life. And of course, you have to take in the theory. The ideas, the teaching are still new to you. You have understood them only to a certain extent and certainly not completely yet. And what you have understood becomes a guide for the life you're going to live. What you study, you are going to apply in daily life. To give a simple example, if you study the process of life and death, the process of reincarnation, karma, but you don't take that into account in life, how you live as if life is a one-time event, then you have not actually understood what's all about. The essence of the study is that you come to a certain degree of selflessness, that you come to understand that any kind of individual happiness is an illusion, and that the important thing is to work and live for the totality of life. So that you understand the idea of universal brotherhood, really understand it, and adjust your whole life accordingly. You want to be active here in order to help your fellow human beings, to support them, to inspire them, to show them the way out of the labyrinth of this outer realm. So that is the first stage of the grand initiation process, which will eventually lead to the great initiation of the great birth. You could call it the embryonic phase, the phase before the real birth takes place, that of the inner man. This phase needs not to be too difficult for everyone. As I said, it's about that other vision of life. And of course, you are being tested from the very first stage. By whom are you being tested? Who is testing you? Life itself is testing you. Or perhaps more correctly, you are being tested by yourself. In fact, if you have decided, based on that different vision on life, that you are going to do things differently, do them better, with more compassion, then you will soon perceive that you will find yourself in certain situations in which you have to show that you are indeed going to do things differently. Actually, there's nothing mysterious or strange about that. If an avid smoker makes the decision to stop smoking, he will undoubtedly at some point come into a situation where someone offers him a cigarette. Or he may find half a pack of cigarettes somewhere in a kitchen drawer, just when he has such a craving for smoking. Do you understand what I mean? These are the trials of life. You have to live up to what you profess. You have to put into practice what you believe. It's that simple. In fact, the tests and trials in all these 7 degrees of initiation are the same. Live up to what you profess. Live what you have studied. Only at the higher degrees, the requirements you have to meet will be much more stringent, much more impersonal, much more from compassion, but the idea is the same. And the key then is to develop discipline. And we are not referring to impose discipline as we know it in an army. It's about self-discipline. The personal self, with its personal desires and peculiarities, must be disciplined. And that is, it should not be at the helm of the ship. The superpersonal self, the impersonal self, is in charge. Discipline is derived from a Latin word discipulus, which literally means learning. It's a learning process, learning to live according to what you have experienced internally as right. To that, you must hold fast. You have to resist temptations to which the personality is attached. If you have gone through the first initiation, the first stage well, then at some point you will also meet your teacher. You will meet your outer teacher when you have developed the contact with your inner teacher. And your inner teacher is the spiritual aspect within you. Then you have developed that. When you have developed that inner teacher into a lasting bond, then you will also meet your outer teacher. And then you have the assurance that you are on the right path. But at the same time, you will have to develop even greater discipline. The teacher cannot go the path of initiation for the student, for the disciple. Each person must do that for himself or herself. And that requires self-discipline. What is still condoned in the early stage is now charged to the student on the path. The requirements become more stringent because the abilities the disciple develops also becomes greater. And if you have not developed the discipline to use those abilities only for the good of all humanity, yes, the good of all that lives, then it is possible that you are going to use knowledge and power for selfish purposes. And nothing is more dangerous than that. We are constantly reminded that occultism is not to be trifled with. It's not a toy. And as you penetrate deeper into the secret, into the hidden treasuries of nature, you become an occultist. And that is one who has more power than his fellow human beings. We can all be Theosophists if we love our fellow humans, if we want the good for all, if we are willing to work for others, then we are Theosophists. But as soon as you penetrate into the deeper layers of yourself, and therefore also in the deeper layers of nature, deeper layers of the cosmos, for man is a copy, a miniature of the cosmos, then you develop faculties by which you strongly distinguish yourself from your fellow men. And therefore, in all initiations, from the first tentative steps on the inward path, it is always pointed out with the utmost emphasis that you must develop selflessness. Only if you forget yourself, your personal self, sacrifice it for the sake of all humanity, as it is called, then you can safely tread the path of occultism. And initiation after initiation, you will become a savior of your fellow human beings. You will become a Christos, a Buddha. But what do these initiations have to do with those four sacred moments of the year? We will try to explain that after the break. But now, there is a break of 3 minutes. Ask your questions, and after the break, I will try to answer those questions. So see you in 3 minutes. Welcome back. Lalibel, are there any questions?
Yes, we've received 2 in the chat on YouTube. I will start with those. Selflessness Selflessness, is that the same as going within yourself?
Not 100% the same, because you can go in yourself because you want to find inner peace, or you don't want to mix with the troubles in the world. So you look for a safe place in yourself. So it's not the same. You can go because of two motives inside yourself. And the one we choose, of course, the one of initiation in the mysteries, is always the selflessness. So, and there is another path that will eventually lead to a kind of peace and rest, but only for yourself. So it's not the same.
Okay.
And it's very important to recognize the difference from the beginning, because in the beginning it seems like they are the same. But if the motive is different, then at the end you will reach totally different places.
Yeah. All right. Another question is different one. Is, do you have opinions on Vril? That is of the coming race, I believe, of the Zanoni book, The Coming Race.
I don't really get the question.
Do you, yeah, what do you think about Vril?
I don't know what is frill.
Yeah, I believe that it, have you read the books of Zanoni?
No.
Oh, okay. It's at least that's the only book I know that mentions that. So maybe if the questioner can be more specific about Vril, what it is and what you want to know, then please ask again.
Yeah, because I really don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another question we've received through email is whether the four sacred seasons are also connected in a way to the northern or southern hemisphere. So does it have to do something with the northern or southern
Yeah,
hemisphere?
because you know the four directions of the wind, north, east, south, and west. In fact, they are connected with the four great initiations, and that is because of the sun is born in the north and then go to the east, to the south, and dies in the west. So the symbolism is in the same in the esoteric year. Yeah, the esoteric year is born in the north, in the winter, then adulthood, yeah, in the east, south, you are middle age and you die old age in the west. So there is a connections. I think I say it in we'll say it in the next part. The land of the west in many cultures was the land of the death. So and those four moments, of course, are also related to a human being. You are born, you are a child, you grown up, you get middle age, and then you die. So the same four benchmarks in a human life, the same four directions of the wind, and the four initiations. They're all together, and they have everything to do with astronomy, with the position of the Earth in relation to the sun, and I will try to explain that in the second part. So,
all right. So the differences between those initiation moments or processes, those you will explain.
I'm going to explain, but
Yeah.
if you use your intuition, you can already get something of it, because you know the north beginning, the birth, and then you know, and then you can for yourself already make a kind of image what it would look like.
Yeah. All right. Also something with astronomy. So the planets that are, I believe, in Zizigay or something, how do you call it? And when they are on one line around the 25th of January in 2021. So that's a while ago. Does it have something to do with initiation?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And you may say that if they are in a straight line, the greatest initiation will take place. And that doesn't mean that they are not in a straight line. There are no initiations, but of a lesser degree, because the relations of the Earth and the other planets and the Sun is at its utmost when they are in a straight line, as syzygy, I think you call it
Yeah.
in English.
Okay.
I'm going to say a little bit about that, but it's a very difficult subject. But I'm going to say something in the second part of the lecture.
All right. Another question through email. Is it true, according to Theosophy, that the more selfless you become, the more opinions do not matter anymore because you grow closer to the truth?
Yeah, if you see opinions as, thoughts that emerge from your personality, then you rise above your personality, and all those opinions you will discover that they are only temporal. They are being born and they exist for some years, maybe a century or 2 centuries, and then they die. But if you penetrate deeper into yourself, you have really, really inside those ideas that the interconnectedness, when you see the interconnectedness of all those apparently separated things, those are more durable, and those are much more important than those opinions. It's what Plato also states in, I think, in the Republic, that those opinions, they come and they go, and like a fashion, they stay some time, and after a time they're not so important anymore because they belong to the personal thought, the personality produces them, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that an opinion is bad or something, but try to be impersonal and look at the opinions from a higher standpoint, and then you may agree or not agree with it, but don't ever say, this is my opinion, or this is his opinion or her opinion, because then you claim a certain thought. And if you are impersonal, it's much more easier to get to the real value of those opinions. And then maybe you have the conclusion, now this opinion is just something that tomorrow nobody speaks about it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I see in the chat on YouTube that the questioner elaborated on his question, or on Vril. It is the universal life force energy that permeates all matter and space in the universe. So it's pure life force energy. And do you have opinions on how to cultivate more of it?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what is meant, but from the standpoint of Theosophy, there is one life, the top of a hierarchy that permeates everything in that hierarchy. We live in it, we belong to it, we are born in it, we die in it. That is what we call the one life. And you can make a comparison with, for instance, an atom or a cell in my body lives within me, is part of me, he belongs to me, he's being born in me, he dies in me. So we are a part of that universal life, of that oneness, of Brahman, as they call it in Sanskrit. So that every little atom is, in fact, an emanation of that life principle, and in that cosmos, of in a solar system of there is a hierarchy, the king, so to speak, the utmost, the one, and the one emanates an atmosphere in which other beings can live, and they emanating sphere where other beings can live. So everything is connected to each other, but always consists of the same life. I think the second part of my talk, I will show you the tree of the universe, which is a very nice metaphor to explain that. And I don't know if the questioner is dealing with this, but this is what we from Theosophy think. So everything is connected, everything is part of the same one life.
All right. I've received through email a small correction on a question I received. The one that said something about the planets that are in line on the 25th of January. And he said 2021, but he meant upcoming January 25. There will be planets on a line. So if that has something to do with initiation.
Well, if it's on the 25th of January, then as far as I know, it is not, because the circumstances should be like this on one of the four benchmarks, 21st of December, of March, etc. And of course, there is a very important influence when those planets are on one line. And I spoke with somebody who is very profound in all those relations of the stars and the planets. And this year is going to be a very, how to say, a year in which a lot of things are going to happen. And the astrological situations of the planets and the sun is in such a constellation that a lot of things are going to happen. And maybe this kind of 3 planets which are on a line is a part of it, but I can give you no details of it. But it has nothing to do with initiation, because that is one of the 4 dates I gave. But it has an influence on Earth. Everything that happens in the cosmos, especially in our solar system, has an influence on the Earth, so on human being, because we are part of it.
All right. Those are the questions for now.
Those are the questions. Well, nice questions. Thank you. Okay. The second part, we're going to talk about solstices and equinoxes. Well, the 4 higher initiations take place at certain cosmically determined times, the 4 crossroads of the esoteric year. At the turning of the seasons, the gates are opened for initiate, provided, of course, that he has passed his preparatory studies and the trials associated with them. Indeed, at those times, the cosmic condition is optimal for initiation. And to explain this, you must be well aware that man is a microcosm. He is composed of the same elements as the cosmos. He has everything in him that the cosmos also has. The cosmos is represented as a cosmic tree of life. There it is, the tree, yeah? The one life, you may say. And that tree is rooted in the spiritual worlds. Those roots create the conditions for the growth of the trunk. The trunk descends into the more material realms, yeah, a lower sphere, so to say. And the trunk in turn creates the growth conditions of the branches. And on those lower cosmic realms, the tree branches out and forms leaves. And the branches create the growth conditions for the leaves. And through that entire tree, the tree is the cosmos, through that entire tree, from the roots to the smallest leaves, the same currents of life flow. So maybe that is a good answer to the question that was asked. So roots, branches, twigs, leaves, everything is connected. One life flows through it. compare it to the human body. All the parts in that body are connected by the veins and the nerves, and all the cells, all the living building blocks of our body is connected to each other. And of course, they are connected to the human being, that is human consciousness. And through the vein system in our body, all parts are supplied with oxygen and food, a beautiful unity of our body. And the same is true for the cosmos. The stars, planets, comets, all are interconnected. We still know little about those interconnections, although astronomy already understands some of them. We humans living on this small blue planet Earth are also connected to all those stars in the cosmos, just as every cell in our body is connected to every other. And to further improve this picture, just realize that those connections, that vein system, does not exist only in a horizontal sense. I mean, we live in this material realm, and we see the sun and the moon and the stars corresponding to this sphere, the sphere in which we live. And there are paths, there are veins, roads, we call them circulations of the cosmos. There are, in other words, paths between our planet and the other planets, the moon, the sun, in this sphere. The outer sun, for example, emits powerful currents of energy, electromagnetic forces which flow in at the North Pole of the Earth. And when those currents are very powerful, they create that beautiful aurora, which you can see even sometimes in temperate countries like the Netherlands. If there are solar storms, as they were frequently last year, and they're going to be this year as well, then there is a torrent of electrically charged solar particles which collide with the Earth atmosphere and can interfere with all kinds of electrical devices and satellites. But in the more inner realms, which we cannot perceive with our earthly devices and measuring instruments, such flows also take place. Think of certain vital currents, but even mental or spiritual currents. Those arrive at the earth, and those who are open to them can be influenced by them. Well known is the astral emotional currents that can flow from the full moon. People who are sensitive to it can be touched by it. Folk tales from around the world are about strange events during nights of full moon. And hospital emergency rooms often run hectic shifts during full moon nights. But there are also vertical correspondences. And what are they? These are the paths, the pathways, the circulation through which life can go from one realm to another. So from the realm perceptible to our senses, to the more astral realm, to the spiritual, and even the divine realm. And the reverse also takes place. So from the divine to the spiritual, to the mental, to the astral, and to our physical world. So we humans can, so to speak, travel horizontally. That is a laborious process. Then we take a rocket to a space station hovering some 100 kilometers above the Earth, and we say that we are in space. We forget that the Earth, with all its inhabitants, is also in space, circulating around the sun at gigantic speed. If we travel vertically, and this thought is necessary to understand something of the great initiations, then we go from this realm to more inner realms. And that goes more smoothly than to travel with rockets, provided, of course, that you are well trained and provided you have the help of your teachers. We hope to explain that later. Now then, let's make that immense cosmos a little smaller in our minds and limit ourselves to the solar system. The solar system, just like a human being or a tree, has pathways, roots, veins, give it the name you want, along which the sun sends the life energies throughout the solar system. Cosmic energies ranging from material to spiritual are pumped around from the spiritual heart of the sun, reaching all corners of the solar system and even beyond. At 4 particular moments of the Earth's year, these correspondences are easier to deal with. And this is because the Earth's relationship to the sun is not always the same. It's a dynamic relationship, so to speak. This picture shows how the Earth travels around the sun in 365.25 days. And because the imaginary Earth's axis is tilted, in the temperate regions of our planet, we have the 4 seasons, so familiar to us. You can say that the year begins when the sun is farthest from the countries of the northern hemisphere. It is perpendicular to the Tropic of Capricorn, the southern tropic. That is the beginning of a new cycle. We have the darkest day, the longest night on December 21. On that day, the sun stands still for a moment, so to speak. Hence, solstice, which means solar standstill. After that, the sun slowly returns. And of course, the sun does not actually return. There's a figure of speech. The Earth revolves around the sun, and around March 21, the sun is exactly above the equator. The day and night are equally long. Equinox comes from the Latin equinoctium, meaning equal night. And then the sun travels further north, is above the Tropic of Cancer on September 21 or 22, the autumnal equinox, and then goes again to the winter point, December 21. It is these 4 times of the year which in almost all civilizations were celebrated. Some civilizations place more emphasis on the winter solstice, others on one of the other sacred dates. And we, of course, know the winter festival, Christmas, which is not a Christian festival. It goes way back far, far before the alleged birth of Christ. The Romans, for example, already celebrated the feast of Sol Invictus, the invisible sun. Easter is the celebrating of spring. The 21st of June is still celebrated grandly in Northern European countries, for example. Unfortunately, not always in a very spiritual way, but more in an alcoholic way. But that doesn't change the fact that it is originally a holy feast, as are the harvest festivals around September 21. We could fill easily the whole lecture with all such festivities around the change of seasons throughout the world. In doing so, there's always a certain sequence comparable to human life, or comparable to the 4 points of the compass. December 21, birth, north. The sun is born in the north. March 21, adolescence, east. 21st of June, adulthood, south. And 21st of September, old age, death, west. In so many cultures, the land of the west is the land of the dead. How come all these ancient cultures knew about this? And how is it that there are so many similarities between so many cultures? It has to do with those mystery schools we have already talked about. the festivities around those schools arose around those schools or from the schools in order to instill in the population some awareness of the great adventures experienced by the neophytes at these times of the year. It is these 4 sacred points in the year when there is a special cosmic condition of the earth in relation to the sun, the moon and the other planets, especially Venus and Mercury, also play a role in this. As I said, answering that question, when they are more or less in a straight line, then the conditions are optimal, and then the greatest initiations can take place. Given time, we cannot go further into that now. Well then, there are 7 initiations. The first 3 are the preparatory stages, but make no mistake, someone who is in the first or in the second stage is already very, very, very different from the majority of people. He has a totally different vision of life. He has already awakened in his own inner compassionate forces over many years, probably many lifetimes. He has shown that compassion is the driving force in his life. He has already worked, perhaps even lifetimes, under the supervision of a master, a Mahatma. We have to say something about those masters, those teachers or hierophants of mystery schools. We call them masters of wisdom and compassion, or Mahatmas. They are also known by other names, and these masters are far, far ahead of their fellows. They have already gone through many initiations, and they have gained first-hand knowledge of those inner worlds. Their aim, however, is not so much individual progress, but their aim is to guide, to help, to inspire mankind on the pilgrimage in which so many of us have gone astray, taken side paths, but in which everyone will eventually achieve oneness with his own inner divinity. These masters take as disciples only those men or women who have shown in daily life that their motive is equally compassionate. And this is an important thought. It's not so much about intellectual skills, knowledge, or other abilities. The important thing is that different view of life, and that view starts from the essential unity that underlies diversity. When such a human being, such a disciple, a chela, we call them, after years of training and testing, has made himself fit for initiation into the mysteries, then as the first great initiation, he will have his own inner divinity born. What will take place then? Such a disciple will be in a quiet place with his teacher around December 21. In ancient times, temples were used for this, such as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. But it could also be in the silence of forests, as was common among the Celts. In any case, one was not allowed to be disturbed. Note that it is the student, the chela, who is initiated. His teacher can no longer help him. He must show that he has truly awakened the noble spiritual element in himself and that he is no longer hindered by the outer world. His body is put into a trance by his teacher. The spirit soul, the spiritual part of human consciousness, is free. We spoke of horizontal and vertical correspondences. While the spirit soul will travel through the correspondences of the cosmos to the lunar sphere, the Venus sphere, the Mercury sphere, to the gates of the spiritual sun. Perhaps it may sound strange to you, but actually, every night when we lay down to rest, we make the same journey, at least if we sleep deeply. It is the journey of man's spirit soul leaving his body. It happens at sleep, it happens at death, and it happens at initiation. The great difference between sleep and death on the one hand, and initiation on the other, is that in the latter case, man makes his journey consciously. You, at least I assume, you don't know where you are when you sleep, or when you sleep dreamlessly. Your body is in bed, but where are you? The neophyte does know. He is aware of himself, he's aware of the sphere and state he is in. When you hear this for the first time, it does sound very fairy tale-like, as if you have entered a fantasy story. How can you travel to other planets? But then keep two things in mind. We are not talking about physical planets. According to Theosophy, planets are concentric spheres around the sun. This picture tried to depict that. Those circles around the sun are the concentric circles of the planets. And the physical planet, which we can see with our earthly eyes, is actually a globe moving around that sphere. There is an Earth sphere around the sun, a Venus sphere, and so on. All these spheres have the sun as their heart and their head. And secondly, the neophyte travels through the inner path of the cosmos. He goes from sphere to sphere. Remember that man is a child of the cosmos and therefore also a child of the solar system. We are children of the cosmos, children of the sun, and of the earth. And the neophyte leaves behind the earthly element that is guarded by his teachers, but being a child of the sun, he also has a lunar part, a Venus part, a Mercury part. It is thanks to those elements, those different bodies, as it were, that he can gain first-hand knowledge in those spheres of consciousness. He becomes, so to speak, the lunar sphere, which he leaves, and then he becomes the Venus sphere, the Mercury sphere, and thus arrives at the spiritual sun. On his journey to the heart of the sun, at the moon, he will leave behind the lunar part, the astral element. At Venus and Mercury, respectively, he will leave his Venus body and his Mercury body, and he appears naked before the sun. He comes, as it is called, face to face with his inner God. He returns along the same correspondences, picks up by Mercury his mercurial element, by Venus his Venus element, by the moon his lunar body, and returns to his earthly body, which was guarded by and protected by his teachers. He returns to that body and is born for the second time. He's clothed with the sun, as it is called in ancient writings. He is a Dvisha, as it is called in Sanskrit. And Dvisha means a twice born. He's an initiate, a Christos. Is he accomplished? Certainly not. Initiation means making a beginning, a new start. It is, in other words, the beginning of something, of a new life. The initiation of the great birth, that of December 21, was the first of the 4 great initiations, but more will follow, in which the neophyte always penetrates more inside himself and get to know the inner realms of the sun, of the solar system, better and better and better. Those initiations will take place at the other sacred times of the year, and more on that later after the break. So now the break, 3 minutes, ask your questions and I will try to answer them after the break. Welcome back. Now, Lalibel.
Yes, we've received a couple more questions. The first one was via YouTube. Maybe you will explain it later, she says, or he. But can you tell something about what happens when the initiate reaches the sun?
Oh, I would like to know that. But I can say something. We were going to tell that about in the third part, but he's going to meet the divinity of the sun, which is in fact the what Pythagoras called the monos monadum, the upper monad, so to speak, from which other monads, and monads are centers of consciousness, emerge. So in a way, our inner God, our inner divinity is, the same, or is one, or is an emanation of that God, divine being, which is the heart of the sun. So if you get one with the heart of the sun, you get one, you become one with everything in the solar system. There is no more I and you. You are the all, you are everything. Yes. And of course, that is a type of consciousness that is very difficult for us to get a little bit knowledge of it, because then you have to leave the consciousness of I am I, and you have to be, to become the consciousness I am, just I am. Yeah, you perceive that the separateness that we perceive with our earthly senses and our earthly mind is an illusion, because there is no separateness. There is just one big we. And that will happen when you are one with the divinity, which is yourself, and which is the divinity of the sun. So to get just an idea, if you have a beautiful inspiration, for instance, when you are in the mountains or you are on a very quiet beach, and you perceive that everything you see is in fact the same as you are the birds, you are the every grain of sand, you are the mountains, you are, the millions of people who live in the town you see. If you perceive something of that sense of unity, well, and then 10,000, a million times more intense, that is when you behold your inner God, and in the greatest initiation, you become one with your inner God. So it's something very, very, very difficult for us to perceive, but nevertheless, it's very good to meditate on it, to think on it, to try to perceive that everything is interconnected, and that everything in the heart of his heart is one. There's one life. Meditate on it. It's very peaceful. It gives a lot of inspiration, and you are better able to do your duty in the world if you have kind of image of the unity of everything.
Is that the same level of consciousness you reach when you've passed all 7 grades or degrees of initiation?
Yeah, I think it's the 7th.
Yeah.
And at the 7th degree, you have the choice. But I'm going to tell that later.
Okay. Another question we've received. What does our higher part do on those other planets when our body is sleeping? So what happens there? Because you reach those planets, even though they're not the physical planets like you said, but what does our higher part do there?
Well, that is a very profound question. And if you really look at an answer, you have to study human psychology and the esoteric psychology. Because, in fact, a human being is a stream of consciousness consisting of various monads. A monad, call it an entity. A monad, the center of consciousness. So we have our personality or person, ego, or the monad that is manifesting itself in the personal ego, because in fact the monad stays always on those inner realms of the cosmos. We have an animal monad. Our body is a living being, but we have also the higher monads in a human being. So the real human being, the reincarnating ego, is in fact free as the personal ego sleeps and has its adventures on the realm where it belongs. And sometimes the personal ego, so the Lalibel, the Barend, or personal ego, perceives something of it. And when you wake up, you know that you have dreamt, you have images, but they are too ethereal to hold them. And you wake up and you feel that the images, the ideas of those realms are falling from you, like water from the feathers of a duck. It's yeah, you are too cross. Your mental state is too cross to use those ideas. So in fact, you are not yet trained, and you, personal ego, is not yet trained to fully understand what's happening there. Compare it to a little boy who doesn't know anything of mathematics, and then he goes to, a college, university, and then the professor is teaching mathematics, is writing on the blackboard, and he doesn't understand anything, and he falls asleep because he doesn't have yet any affinity with those mathematical worlds. Well, that is the same with us. So the reincarnating ego has its adventures when we sleep, and our inner God is active on its inner realm when we are asleep. In the course of our evolution, and that we can accelerate by initiation, we will get used to those inner worlds, and we will have our adventures there too, because we are also a part of those worlds. But yet we are so focused on the outer realm that we don't have the instruments, so to speak, to get any self-conscious information of those inner worlds. But it will come. It will come.
And what does, when your higher parts have their adventures in those realms, what are those adventures? What happens there?
Well, they have their evolution also. They will have their trials and their happiness. And of course, they are of a much loftier level than ours, but they are not perfect in the sense that they have nothing to learn. They are growing also. So they have their evolution on their realms, just like the lower parts in us, our animal part, or the animals outside us, also have their adventures and are growing. Everything is growing. Everything is in a process of developing powers which are within the monad. Everything that exists, from a little atom to the sun to an animal or plant, and because there is a hierarchy, each one does it on their level. So we are in the class of the school that we call humanity, human kingdom, and we are developing our mind, our capacity to think, and there are beings which are further, and they are growing in what we call buddhi. Yeah, that is the spiritual part. They are learning there, have their lessons there, and that is the divine part, and so on and so on.
All right. And another question we've received is also about the knowledge you can gain on those inner spheres during initiation. How can you use it? Can you use it, and how can you use it back on Earth?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can use it for sure. For sure, you can inspire your fellow human beings. You can point the direction you have to go, you have to go. You can go if you want to get, if you want to free yourself from the limitations of this material world. And the real initiations in the mystery schools of wisdom and compassion, the only goal is to come back in order to be better able to inspire the fellow human beings. They don't go on those initiations for themselves. They do it to be better able to help their fellow human beings. And there is a lot to say about that, because in fact, all the noble aspects in our societies in the past and nowadays, the ideas come from those initiated masters. So it's not a group of human beings that is isolated in Tibet or another place. No, they are, of course, they don't mix with the masses because they can't help them, but they are always active on the mental level to inspire humanity and to point out the way to those more lofty regions of the universe. In fact, the mystery schools were schools where only you were accepted if you had a fall. You should promise that you would live according to certain ethics levels, but the masses were always, inspired as well with myths and fairy tales and dramas, etc. So it's all about the whole. It's never about the individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've received 2 more questions through YouTube as well. Can we say that with the founding of the Theosophical Society, an outer organization has been set up that the knowledge that has the knowledge to enable accelerated development for serious students of Theosophia?
That's the main reason why it was founded. That's the main reason. Yeah.
All right, that's a quick answer.
You can say it's the backyard. I think it's the backyard of the mystery school. It's not yet a mystery school, but you can enter a mystery school by entering and studying and above all applying Theosophy. Yeah.
All right, and another question. What is the oh, this is plural, but that doesn't matter. What is Theosophical Society's opinion on practicing celibacy for the biological benefits? And this is part of an initiatory process.
Well, the Theosophical Society doesn't have any rules in that aspect. The only thing you need to underscribe, is that English? Is the fact that
Stress?
you
It's to stress.
The stress that you accept the idea of universal brotherhood. That's all. That's all. And the rest we leave to the conscience and the knowledge of our members. So if you want to live the way, if you want to live with a family, all right. You want children, okay. You don't want it, good. I hope you have good reasons for the one or the other. And the only thing we advise, be unselfish. Yeah, do it for the whole. But we are not going to say what you should do or not should do. That's because the first thing, we cannot do it because everybody has his own past, his own karma. The duty, says the Bhagavad Gita, of the other is full of danger. So I cannot say you should do this or you should do that. That's the first thing. The only thing we hope is that everybody thinks how he or she can be a compassionate force, a spiritual force in the world. And if you do it by finding a family or another way, well, that's your question. That is your karma. That is your way of living. And we respect it, whatever you do.
That's it for now.
That is it. Okay. Well, the inner God. Well, I hope I've made it clear that initiations, so also the initiation of the great birth, should not be understood as if somebody else is handing you something, as if a master is communicating a certain secret to you. Yes, not even as if a God is pulling up the veil of a mystery, and as a result, you have suddenly become wise and more powerful. No. Initiation is the opening of something within yourself, something that was already there, but was covered by the thick filth of personality, by lower thinking, and therefore you can also say that initiation is an awakening. You wake up in the areas of being that you were previously unaware of, or only partially aware of. Or to put it another way, you activate certain aspects, certain qualities in your own consciousness. Activating those aspects means waking up. So the neophyte awakens in a certain realm of being. And as it involves the initiation of a higher degree, you will also become more awake in the inner realms. Before the break, we taught something about the initiation of the mystic birth, the initiation that underlies our Christmas. These initiations lasted, depending on the degree, and this is depth, 3 or sometimes even 14 days. If the initiation begins on the 21st of December, so in the night of the 24th to the 25th, the initiate returns. And therefore, on the night of the 25th, a Christus, a Christ, is born. And when there was an initiation of a high degree, on the 4th of January, the initiate, as twice born, was born. And therefore in Christian Orthodox countries, such as Russia and Ukraine and Greece, Christmas is celebrated until the 6th or 7th of January. That day is celebrated by Catholics as 3 kings, or Epiphany, the appearance of a god. More about Epiphany later. We could say much more about it, but time is always limited when discussing these matters. The only thing I would like to say is that it is abundantly clear that all these celebrations went back to the mysteries, and especially to the winter initiations, that of the mystic birth. When the disciple on the path was successfully passed the 4th initiation, when he has passed through the gates of death to the edge of the golden spiritual sun and had returned to his body, which was in trance and guarded by his teachers, then the next initiation will be that of the great temptation. This initiation does not necessarily take place in the same year. In fact, it's likely to take place many years later and maybe in a subsequent life. What does the spring initiation entail? Look, there has been a successful appeal to the inner God. You have stood, as it were, face to face with your own divinity. Can you live up to this divine power in life? You know, when you have awakened something in yourself, whatever it may be, you are tested in life. Whether you live up to what you know, live up to what you have considered, yes, what you have even become for a while. Such things already occur in everyday life. If a person decides not to gossip anymore, just to give an example, and if he hears gossip about a colleague at work during the lunch break, does he clearly show that he doesn't like it? Or does he fall back to his old level? Now, the trials of the fifth initiations are many, many times greater, incomparable greater. In fact, the initiate must show that he has renounced all weaknesses from all his previous lives. He must show that neither in a negative sense nor in a positive sense do those adventures, those impressions from all his past lives affect him in any way. And you see how trained the disciple must be on the path. And let us not forget that this training is even beginning for us now. It will no doubt have happened to you too, at one time or another, that you find yourself in a certain atmosphere which is below that in which you usually are. Think of an unpleasant conversation between people who want to belittle or despise other people. Think of an atmosphere in which people are talking only about money and wealth, bragging about their luxuries, about the big car they have or the faraway vacation. Do you manage to remain yourself in such materialistic atmospheres? Do you stay at your own level of consciousness, or do you feel irritated? Go against it. Address the other person with a raised voice, or do you join in and also go out of your way and do everything possible to show what you are capable of and what you possess? If you really want to rise above this kind of situation, you must feel no resentment, no contempt for those people, but neither must there be anything of positive attraction. Perhaps you have dwelt in such spheres in the past. That is even likely, because otherwise you would not be karmically attracted to them. Just compare it with a drug addict who has freed himself from his addiction. But now he goes back to his old bodies who have not yet freed themselves. He descends again, as it were, to an atmosphere, and I choose that word descend deliberately, and then he has to show that he only wants to help. He feels no aversion to that sphere. He does not feel any desire for that sphere. He's completely detached from it. In the initiation of the great temptation, the neophyte really descends into the underworld, into Hades, as the Greeks called it. In studying Theosophia, especially with regard to certain terms, it is good never to take that in an absolute sense, and therefore the underworld is not a term cast in concrete. Actually, it is a world, a sphere, which is below the level of where a person normally resides. So for the gods, our world is undoubtedly an underworld. When the neophyte descends into the underworld, he goes to that part of the astral realm in which all the lower elements, the lower emanations of humanity, the lusts and desires especially, are stocked. It's like the ex-addict we spoke of, who has risen from his world of addicts and descends there again. The neophyte, therefore, in that underworld, needs to get rid of all old thoughts and ideas which are of a lower level than what he must come to regard as the new norm. So he has to break free from any attachments to things, perhaps a slight pride, a certain selfish preference, etc., etc. And that not only with respect to this life, but with respect to all his past lives. He needs to be completely detached from his past. During the many lives we lived, we have thought almost innumerable thoughts. And all those thoughts are living beings, supplied by us with life energy. And if they are below the notional line of selflessness, then they should in no way exert any attraction on one who must be so purified if he is to enter the portals of the spiritual sun. And note, attraction does not only imply that something is pleasing you, but it arises just as much when something repels you. Those who have read the Bhagavad Gita knows that the hero, Arjuna, has to kill all his old enemies and even friends, teachers, relatives on the battlefield. And of course, this is a metaphor. It means that he has to kill all his old personality-derived habits, not literally. He should rise above them. He should not be connected with them in any way, either negatively or positively. The myth of Orpheus in the underworld paints the same picture. Although the imagery is different, the background is the same. Orpheus is like Arjuna, a disciple on the path of occultism, the divine wisdom, and in the myth, the divine wisdom is symbolized by Eurydice, his beloved wife. And when Eurydice is killed by a snake, Orpheus is given permission to visit Hades and to take Eurydice back with him, on the condition that when he walks to the exit of Hades, he should not look back to see if his wife is walking behind him. But Orpheus did look back, and his union with the esoteric doctrine, personified as Eurydice, was broken. He was still attached to the past, and the initiation failed, because initiations can fail. Now, this is not an historical story, although there was once a disciple on the path named Orpheus. He really lived and was the founder of a mystery school, and his name was used in this myth, a myth that was a warning to those who were careless on the path of initiation. Do not be reckless regarding occult teachings. You cannot mock with occultism. We are taught that in initiations there are three possibilities: success, partial success, and failure. And failure can mean death or insanity. Failure occurs when the initiate fails to face what he must face. He's not strong enough. And the tragedy is that the neophyte has seen the greatness, has seen the beauty, has seen the inexpressible bliss of the spiritual godly life, but has not succeeded in rousing it permanently within him. But if the initiation does succeed, a master rises from the dead, one who has become the spiritual divine, indescribable bliss, a new savior of humanity. But even this initiation is not the end point. How can there be an end point in the boundlessness? As the initiations become more exalted, they become more difficult for us to understand. There is the summer initiation of June 21, the summer solstice, which in some countries is celebrated as quaintly as Christmas. Around that time, there is the initiation of the great renunciation. Once again, the initiate will pass through the gates of death, and through the correspondences of the cosmos, he will visit various planets and go up to Father Sun, the spiritual sun, the heart and the head of the entire solar system. But the hallmark of this initiation of the summer solstice is that the initiate renounces the reward, renounces the harvest, so to speak, for the sake of the greater good. It is the great sacrifice. And why does the initiate sacrifice his reward? It's compassion that drives him. He knows that there can be no bliss if all that lives must suffer. And that's why he renounces his reward, he renounces that to which he is entitled by virtue of his own development for the sake of the great orphan, humanity. And finally, there is the initiation of the great passing, which occurs at the time of the autumn equinox, but which, as we have been taught, is very, very rare. There must be a special cosmic constellation when it can take place. This is the most mysterious initiation. Very little has been said about it. You might call it the initiation of the final choice. Does the initiate become part of a state of consciousness so exalted, so far removed from our own that we have no words for it? Does he pass into that state and does not return to earth? Or will he sacrifice everything and remain as a Nirmanakaya? And Nirmanakaya is a living Buddha who renounces nirvana and stays here in the earthly sphere in order to serve as a guide for all those who come after him, all those people in the earthly maze in which there is so much more suffering than joy. In all these 7 initiations, so also the preparatory phase of study, all those in which you have not yet met your teacher, all involve a contact with the inner God. I should actually express it better. The contact is always there, but there's always a flow of inspiration emanating from our inner God. But most people are focused on the outside of things and do not perceive the influence within them, or only perceive it barely. The inner path begins when we begin to experience something of the divine influence that comes to us from within. And the degree to which we become aware of it will increase as we progress on the path. At the first tentative steps on the inward path, we may vaguely feel the presence of our inner divinity. As we call upon it, and in daily life fulfill our duties, endure the trials, we will experience more and more of that inner divinity. And then, in the great initiations, we really get to know the inner God, behold him, or even become one with him. Different stages of contact with our own inner divinity. And the following names were used for the following initiations in the Greek mysteries: Epiphany, Theophany, Theopneusty, and Theopathy. And the fourth initiation, the initiation in which we fully experience the presence of the inner God. It is called Epiphany. This is a Greek word meaning shining upon or illuminating. In Catholic circles, this word is known. It indicates the arrival of the three kings or the three sages. It is celebrated on the 6th of January. Actually, it should be the 4th of January, 14 days after the winter solstice, but in Roman times, calendars were often manipulated by emperors so that they could stay longer in power. What took place during this initiation? The inner God is awakened, is, so to speak, born in the neophyte. The initiate leaves his body, travels through the channels, the correspondences of the cosmos, past the sacred planets to the front portals of the sun. Beyond that, he does not reach yet. He resonates with the divine, which irradiates him. What he had studied until then, he now truly becomes to know. And then the fifth initiation is called Theophany. Theophany means the appearance of a God. It's actually the following mystery. The human being is under trial, the chela is under trial and meets his own self, God's self, its own higher self, its God's self, face to face. And for a longer or shorter time becomes one with it. The great trial is whether the resurrected divinity in the disciple does indeed correspond to him. If he succeeds, he knows truth. The only way of really understanding a thing is to become that thing. And that is the real meaning of what takes place in initiations. And then the sixth. If the theophany is more or less complete, upon the ending of the initiation or the trial, the chela has Theopneusty, meaning divine inspiration. He is consciously united with his inner God. He not only becomes one with his inner God, but literally the inner God breathes down into him for a longer or shorter time. What we breathe in passes through our entire being. In this initiation, the neophyte permanently becomes the inner God within him. He breathes out only the divine characteristic. Upon returning, he takes his active place in the hierarchy of compassion. And then the seventh initiation, the highest of all the ancient initiations achievements, increase. It was called Theopathy, meaning the suffering of a God. Please do understand, it's not the God who suffers, but the candidate suffers, that is, endures the conscious entrance into him of a God. It means that he becomes, through that holy presence in him, a walking, living God, his own inner self, his higher self, of course. And now there are two options. Or he disappears from the world and moves on to a greater spiritual sphere, or he refuses and stays. And then he gives up his own further progress and continues to operate in the field that he has actually outgrown, but nevertheless he stays. In 2 weeks, when we will talk about the silent watcher, we come back to this great sacrifice, the ultimate demonstration of compassion. A wonderful, inspiring example for all of us. We have our final break, 3 minutes, and then I'm looking forward to your questions. Welcome back. That was nice music, the Peer Queen Suite of the Norwegian composer Grieg. And if I'm properly informed, I think that have everything to do with initiations as well. So it was a good choice, this music. Thank you. Lalibel, are there any questions?
Yes, we've received two. First one is, can someone pass an initiation and not be aware of that he's passed it?
No, because that's not possible, because initiation, at least initiation in the mysteries as we see it, is a self-conscious process, so you be aware of it.
Yes. All right.
Maybe a pity for
short answer, but maybe that's all right. I mean, you also said something about the planets, for example, and the spheres there, that maybe it's something you should be aware of.
Of course, yeah.
All right. A different question we've received. How can you show that you don't like gossip? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think it's not so difficult. If at the coffee break or at the lunch break, 2 or 3 of your colleagues are talking badly about another colleague who isn't there, then you simply say, well, please, can you stop it? Because I think it's not fair to talk about somebody who isn't there. Be brave. It's not so difficult. Because, gossip, it's just an example, of course. There are many other examples to give, but it is a very ugly thing, to speak bad about a person who isn't there and who cannot even defend him. So it pollutes the atmosphere in a factory or in an office or whatever you work, in a school. So if you really want to, live Theosophy, then you are the keeper of your brother. So you help each other. So if you see something that has a very selfish source, you try to improve it. Not aggressively, of course. You can talk with each other, but don't tolerate evil things. Yeah. And my experience with it is that if you do it 1 or 2 or 3 times, people will respect it and they stop with it. At least they stop when you are in the neighborhood. And that's at least one thing you have won. Yeah.
Some people are responding to the initiation and that whether you can be aware or not that you've passed it. Some people are responding, what about the lower ones? So the higher ones, you visit the other atmospheres, but the lower ones are lessons, like learnings.
Well, in a certain way, they are the same. Of course, you don't leave your body and you don't have the help of a teacher, and you go to the sphere of the moon and Venus, etc. But you will find yourself in a Hades as well, in an underworld as well. I gave the example of the addict that has freed himself from his addiction and then goes back. So if you have freed yourself from a selfish characteristic, whatever it may be, for sure you will enter in a situation in which that selfish characteristic was usually used by you to do your thing. You know what I mean? Well, take that example of gossip. If you really had many years gossip about colleagues because you like to talk about others, and in a certain moment you realize that it's very ugly, I won't do it anymore. For sure, you come in a situation where some of your colleagues are gossiping about another, and you feel, the temptation to enter that conversation, and you know that that colleague really did something and nobody liked it, and you want to, no, but you don't do it because that's the temptation. You wanted to improve yourself. So in a certain way, that is your Hades at that moment. And this, of course, with everything. If you are not perfect and never met anybody who was perfect, there are always, characteristics, things within you that can be improved. And if you really want to improve yourself, you will find yourself in situations where you have to show that you really have improved yourself. It's very easy to say, well, I won't, I will be unselfish, I will be compassionate, I will, etc., until there is a moment in which, for instance, a very simple example, in which there is a situation where there is hunger and there is just one bread and you know where it is and you are starving. Do you share it with the others? Or do you eat it only by yourself? And I can give you another example, but if you look at your own life, I think you will meet those examples very easily. Because, if you know that the basic of any action is a thought, and if you know that a thought is a living being, and if you have, during many years, many lives, supply that thought with energy, vital energy from your consciousness, that thought will come back again and again and again. And then the temptation you have is not to feed that thought again, but to neglect it in order that it will die. And you neglect it by means of an other thought, a spiritual thought, an unselfish thought. And that is the temptation. In fact, it's very easy. If you stop smoking, for sure, the thought of the cigarette will come back again and again and again. And if you don't have a clear, strong image of a life without cigarettes, a positive formulated life, for instance, that you need to be satisfied with yourself, well, then you will overcome the addiction. And as I say at the moment, the cigarette will not have any influence on you, not negatively, not positively. That is a kind of struggle. And that is the famous struggle you find in the Eddas, you find in the Bhagavad Gita, you find in so many myths, the wars, not really a war, of course, but the struggle between the lower self and the higher self. And in fact, the word struggle of war, we use it because everybody understands it, but you don't have to fight with your lower self. It's a good instrument, but focus on the higher self. The higher self should be at the helm of the ship of consciousness and not the lower self. The personality is a good servant, but he shouldn't be in charge, so to speak. Well, that is something we all will meet when we try to improve our lives, improve our consciousness, be more compassionate, more living from from impersonal love, etc.
Are these the daily initiations that Judge and GDP talk about?
Exactly. And if you are going to study next week with us, which I really recommend, you will find, because I already selected a short text of William Quine Church, which is called The Daily Initiations. And every time when you overwin such an old thought, when you killed him, and in the metaphor of the Bhagavad Gita, you killed your friend or your uncle or whatever it may be, your nephew, because they are uncles or friends, because you are so accustomed to them, because they lived many, many lives with you. You have supplied them with so many of yourself, your energy, that they belong to the personal ego you were. But you changed your life. You said, I don't want to be anymore that selfish guy I was. I want to be another. But those thoughts will come back. And then we speak of struggle, but it's not a struggle. If you focus on the lofty ideals, the beautiful things, that's why to study Theosophy is the first two steps, the first two initiations, because then you focus your mind on other things. Then you study the interconnectedness of all beings. Then you study the interconnectedness of all the stars and the moon and the planets, and you see the relations between everything, That's a beautiful study. Then you don't have time for selfish thoughts when you study Theosophy. Yeah, and that's the way. Eventually, if you continue, you will grow in consciousness, and you will eventually be one of those who can really go to the fourth initiation of the great myth. But the Christ can be born in you already now. Maybe not fully, but every time you make your impersonal ideal and concrete goal in your life, the Christ in yourself, the Buddha in yourself is manifesting itself, not fully, of course, but a part. So you grow to Buddhaship, you grow to Christship.
I think we've one last question. Let's see, maybe, no, this is the last one so far. When an initiant returns and succeeds, what would the world experience as an influence?
Well, there's some very beautiful tales about that. He's clothed with the sun. There's really an aura of light around him. So he has become a master. And for instance, there is a very beautiful initiation story of the Buddha, who is under the Bodhi tree, and then he overcomes, gloriously the temptations by Mara. It's of course symbolic. And then he stands up, and he's a godly being, and he's going to tell the world the way to salvation. He's going to tell everybody the path, the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And he attracts people. He's a pillar of light. So everybody noticed a great man, a divine man is born. And of course, you have to have something of that Christ light or that Buddhic light within yourself in order to recognize it. But I think the majority of people have some ideas, some impersonal ideas, and they will recognize those great men and women who really, after the initiation, But it depends on the situation on Earth. I mean, nowadays we are so focused on other things that, you know, if an initiated person walks in the street and people are focusing on other things, he won't be noticed anymore and nobody will listen. So depending on the situation is whether those masters be active physically in the world or not. And I think nowadays they are very active, for sure. They're very active, but not openly. More on the mental sphere, more on the sphere to inspire people, to give ideas. And if we develop in ourselves something of that Buddhic light, the Tathagata, as the master called it, that is the Buddhic light in ourselves, then we have contact with those spheres, with those masters, and we are inspired by them. Of course, we have to do the work. They cannot learn for us and we cannot learn for others, but we can help each other, inspire each other, and point a direction. And that is also today happening on all areas on the earth where there are people open for the influence of those initiated people.
That was the last question.
That was the last question. Well, thank you, Lalibel. Thank you for the beautiful, inspiring questions. I really like them, and it's a pity I cannot see you, but I hope you feel something of the beauty of those initiations. And I was a poor instrument to tell something about it because it's much more loftier than I am able to tell you. But study it and you will find a lot of inspiration. So next week, we invite you to study with us about the mystical birth. It's very inspiring. You have to go to our website and you give your name and your email address so we can send you the Zoom link because we study with Zoom. It's very inspiring. And then the 2nd of February, we have another talk in this series, The Silent Watcher. But now we end with the Kaitri, and that is an invocation to our higher self, to the inner God. And the inner God is named here the Golden Sun. But the Golden Sun is your inner divinity. O thou, golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant calls of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.